Welcome to the Brandtelling Podcast, where we go beyond basic branding with powerful stories as told by brand builders, owners, and founders. Now, here are your hosts, Chief Brand Teller Arthur Germain and the Brand Chef Asaf Bachman.
As a business owner or founder, there's a good chance that you used to work for someone else. Some of us were focused on the future and always saw ourselves launching and building our own businesses. Others, like me, were more accidental entrepreneurs.
Oh, your favorite word.
Yeah, I became an accidental business owner when I was, let's say, released from a corporate position. In any case, directed or accidental, your perception of what a business should look like is shaped by your past experiences, the good, the bad, the ugly.
Same thing happened to me. I was hired by family and worked my way up for 10 years. And when I left, I realized the company was a mess and ran like a circus. They were making money, but it was almost like a foolproof industry. You know, they almost had no way to fail. Their success was really built up a misleading feeling within me.
Yeah, and that shaped your perception of what it was like to build your own business, right?
Yep, but I wanted to be different in my approach to success.
Yeah, there's a good chance you built your own brand to create a more empowering experience in business. For some people, that means feeling less stressed and indebted to their job by pivoting inside a job or taking the leap to build their own business. That requires a big shift in their perception of what they should expect from a business. And that's what we're going to discuss on today's episode. Welcome back to the Brandtelling Podcast. I'm Arthur Germain, and with me is my co-host, Asaf the Brand Chef Bachman.
Thanks, Arthur. Today's guest is Joan Gaffney, founder and chief executive coach at ShiftNova Coaching Advisory, where she helps people create a healthy relationship with their careers and businesses. One of the things she does is guide individuals and business owners through what she calls a career detox as they pivot in their careers and businesses. Her business tagline is optimizing the human experience. Joan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to join you both.
Thanks so much. And, full disclosure to our audience, we've started and restarted 4 times, people walking outside in the hallway. This is the true experience. We don't give the audience the live experience. We kind of give them the recorded and edited experience. But Joan is sitting here trying not to laugh as she's like, how many times are you going to introduce me today, guys? So
it's the director's cut.
Thanks very much. And Joan, also full disclosure, we all know one another. We have networked together, hung out together. And Asaf and I were really excited to get you on the podcast because you kind of get a lot of what we're doing. There's the marketing aspect. There's the just being in business aspect.
I think it's also the relationship between marketing and branding, which so many people get confused. I think you know very, very well.
Yeah, and so we're really pleased to have you here today. And I want to start by asking you a little about your business. Who do you coach and advise, and what are some of their most common issues?
Yes, thank you, Arthur. So it's interesting. My business has been a journey. And I think that that E word that Arthur doesn't like, I think that's one of the most important things that we have to learn is that we take this journey and we're creating and we're building. And when you can let go from that, all of a sudden it becomes fun. Right. So when I started my business, it looked really, really different. And my thought was really, really different. But there was something there. There was a nugget underneath it all that came back around to me. And that's where this career detox comes in. And what it's really about for me is recognizing how in businesses, and especially in corporate, because I spent nearly 30 years in corporate business. Yeah. And working for all different size companies, everything from small bootstrap startups to large global organizations. And what I recognized was that it conditions you. And it's out there. I mean, you can Google corporate conditioning.
Right.
And I started to recognize how certain things in my own thinking had become patterned. And I think it's completely understandable. So many people start to go, wait a minute, why doesn't this feel right? We start to encounter patterns like if you're transitioning between jobs, you're not even sure how to introduce yourself anymore, right? Because we become identity with the job, identity with the employer. And so when I started to see that and understand that a lot more, I really thought, this is what I want to help people with. I've been trained. I'm a certified professional coach, ICF accreditation. So I've gone through all the trainings. And so it's all about, how do I want to use these skills as a coach to help people? And it's all about helping them have a healthy relationship with their career, which is theirs, or their business.
All right. Was there a single trigger that, one day you just woke up and you say, I'm done, 30 years is enough, I need to go on my own?
I think I have the E gene inherited. My parents had their own business, their own small business. And so I always watched that, and I learned so much from them having that small business, especially once I was early in my marketing career. Really absorbed that. And I always, I think, just wanted to have my own thing. What was interesting was I was in corporate marketing, and I was a strategist. I was really a business strategist, and I was heavily involved in product marketing and go-to-market strategy. And that, at the time, wasn't really something that I could easily see being my own thing, because usually in marketing, you think more aside of like what you do about design, right?
Design and promotion and things like that. Right?
Exactly. And those just weren't my wheelhouse. A strategy is an intangible a lot for people. Right. So it was really a challenge to figure out, what does this look like for me? Funny enough, I had an opportunity to be a consultant for a go-to-market strategy. And what I learned through there was, I don't want to be a consultant, because I love to co-create with people.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's, your business the best. So when it comes to business coaching, it's about, your business the best. I know go-to-market strategy. I know how to position things, and I know business. And so I work a lot with consultants. I work with other coaches, because they need that sounding board. They need somebody who understands business and the dynamics that can really help them to see what they've got. Because when you're standing in it, it's really hard to see what it is.
Yeah. Right. I want to go on that, because, let the audience know, I was working on copy on my website, and I think of myself as the copy guy, right? And it didn't read well to me, so I asked Joan to look at it, and Joan's first comment was, who are you writing this to? And I said, well, my audience, I described my audience. She said, so read it again, and why does it sound like you're talking about them in the third person? And I was, instead of saying, hey, you should do this, or take a look at this, what are you doing? It didn't say that. It said, the client should look at this. I'm like, yeah, the client should. Who's the client? Who am I talking about? And so, and it's hard when you're standing in it, I'm standing in the water and I'm going, what's the problem here? I feel wet. My feet feel wet. That's because you're standing in the water, And so I think it's a really helpful thing to do that. And I think that's good coaching. We've had Kevin Barry on the podcast before, and he has said there's a difference between training and coaching. Training is pouring knowledge in. Let me show you how to do a thing, take you through a process. Coaching is now, let me pull that knowledge out of you. Let me talk to you about the things you know and that you can improve. I love that differentiation. And I think that's what you were doing with me, going, well, you know how to write, Arthur. What's wrong here? What doesn't feel right? Like, can you feel what's not right? And I think that's very helpful.
I think that's what you do with a lot of your clients.
Yeah, I try, but it is hard. Like you said, if you're in it, it's tough. Yeah. What are some of the pivots, the changes that a business owner might go through in their business that kind of causes the stress that you were talking about needing to detox from?
Yes. Well, I think one of the big things are for those people who transition out of corporate, like Asaf, you probably went through this, Arthur, you as well.
Yes.
And, there's a couple of things that happen. One is, depending on how you came through that transition, for some of us, it was maybe unplanned. For some of us, it's, we see the writing on the wall and we're just going to hold on till we get that package.
Yeah, right.
And other times we do decide, I'm done. And maybe we have an inkling of what we're going to do. But the point is that something brought you out of that. And so you do need to take a beat, and you need to figure that out, because there were stressors there. And if you don't look at what those were and unpack them, and as I call it, detox from them, those patterns are going to stay with you. Because, there's a really interesting distinction between perception and perspective. perception is sensory. Perception is what we take in. We're like little antennas all the time. And it's what's creating these rules and things we don't even know. It's the way that our mind is organizing chaos. That is what creates our perspective, which is how we view things, how we see things. So through your years in corporate, you're absorbing all of these things.
Right.
And you even get to this point where you're not even sure if you agree with that.
Yep.
Right? But now that has formed that lens that you view everything through.
Right.
So if you truly want a different experience, you have to get acquainted with what are those automatic thoughts so you can really create something that feels good for you in business.
Right.
And the same thing with your career. You know, a lot of people will decide, I want to get out of here, so I'm going to go out, I'm going to be a consultant because I can do this thing. Okay, but you're now a business owner.
Right.
Right.
There's so much more involved.
Right. And guess what? You felt like you had a lot overwhelming you in your corporate job. You now have about 6 different jobs. Right? Because you are what we call a technical CEO.
That's right.
Right?
That's
but now you still have to do all the business development. It's not like you just get to do the work that you love. I mean, even as a coach, I have my clients, but the amount of time that I spend coaching is not as much as all of the doing.
Right. All the admin, marketing, sales, everything.
We were talking earlier before the podcast about a new guide that you're creating, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But even, having to think about this and put something together and, am I trying to reach a different audience with this, or am I trying to target my core audience with this? We joke the chef is wearing his chef's hat right here, but he wears many hats as he's, building the business.
Yep.
And one other thing I wanted to ask you about, like when you think about those stressors, maybe you could talk about the stressors for the business owner when they go through some of those business changes, an M&A, a rebrand, or a refresh in the brand. How do those impact the business owner from your standpoint?
Those are tremendous, Arthur. I mean, first of all, so often when some of those things you're talking about, when you're a founder owner and you go through an M&A, that can be incredibly difficult. I've seen that both firsthand through my own family business, but also with clients. Because what happens, and I think you both will appreciate this, is that you are the brand.
Right.
It becomes your personality. So one of the things that I really work with my business clients on is helping them to create the entity of their business so that it is separate. It can be you, and yes, things like your values should be present in that business, but having a relationship with, and that meaning the business is external to you, is important, because when you go through those things, somebody coming in and valuing it, it can become really personal.
Yeah.
Right? So now...
Absolutely. Because they're judging you and everything you spend every moment of the last X amount of years building.
Right. Or that's at least your perception, right?
That is right. And it's a completely
of it.
Understandable perception. Yet to that person, what they're going to look at are going to be the things like, well, what's your book of customers? What's your retention rate? How long does it take to get customers? And they are honestly going to be thinking about how much of that book are we going to be able to retain? Because if you are your brand, if you are the business, they know a good amount of that business is going out the door.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. In just a moment, we're going to continue catching up with Joan Gaffney.
Hey, if you're enjoying the Brandtelling Podcast, there are 3 ways that you can work with us. First, become a guest on the podcast. Asaf and I are always looking for spicy guests. That's business owners and founders who have something to share with our audience. If this sounds like you or someone you know, please email us at podcast@brandtelling.com. Second, stay in the loop on everything going on at the Brandtelling Podcast and get yourself a copy of everyone's favorite chapter from my book, The Art of Brandtelling. The chapter is called 5 Steps for Telling Your Own Powerful and Differentiated Story, and it's yours to download for free at subscriber.brandtelling.com. And finally, schedule an introductory call with us and see if we're a fit for your branding challenges. It's a half-hour call to get to know one another and for you to see whether Asaf or I, or both of us, can guide you toward building your perfect brand. Schedule now at letsmeet.brandtelling.com. And now let's get back to the episode.
Okay, welcome back. Our guest is Joan Gaffney, who is the founder and president of ShiftNova. And, during the break, we talked briefly about values. So I want to talk about that with the audience. Tell me about values, the impact on the individual, but the impact on the brand.
Yes, I think that's so important. And Arthur, you had mentioned something earlier that really struck a chord for me around this, right? Is we think about it, especially for those of us who have operated in corporate, especially those that operate in corporate marketing like myself, oftentimes values became like this advertising tool, right? It was something that was what we promoted to customers. I have a very different perspective on this, which is that values are not about your customers. Values are about you and your team. When you're making a business decision, you should be looking at those values. When something becomes unclear, look at your values. Are you making decisions as a management team, as a business owner based on your values? That's what the values are there for. In fact, I run a workshop on client attunement, customer attunement. So we think as the customer, a little bit like what we did, Arthur.
Right.
And I ask my clients to look at their values and say why they matter to the customer.
Right.
Right? Those values don't matter. What those values produce matters.
Right.
Right.
I talk about these 7 factors for brand success, and one of them is it relevant? And, one of the ones that I think that comes up is I've had the conversation where you talk to a business and you say, what's one of your values? And the value is profitability. And the reason that for them, it's because profitability equals sustainability. If I can have profitability in the business, I can sustain and grow the business. And that's great.
Yeah.
But I don't think your customer wants to hear that you want to be profitable. You can spin that in a certain way. Maybe you can say, listen, a profitable business is a healthy business and you want to do business with a healthy business. I understand. But there's usually a better way to say that for the customer.
Or just something better to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. Or something better
more
to talk
relevant
about.
to the customer beyond money.
That's right. Companies that want to, in their press releases, say that they're growing and this represents growth and they're going to brag on the multi-million-dollar contract they got. And I go, who does that serve?
Right. They might as well be posting GIFs of people with money, right? Making it rain.
Making it rain.
Because that's what it all is.
And I get it. That's something to be proud of, but that's the reason for an internal newsletter. Yeah. And you can talk to the people internally. The external newsletter might say, we're pleased to bring on a new customer that we can serve, et cetera. But
yeah.
One of my personal favorite thoughts, and I would frequently share this with my team, is don't operationalize the customer.
Yeah.
Right.
Right? What is it about this that matters for the customer? And I know, Arthur, you are another fan of this, but the what's in it for me, WIIFM, right? That is so important to keep in mind because, yes, we want to have that identity as our brand. We also need that ability to pivot, to shift, as I say, hence ShiftNova, to shift into seeing through the client's eyes.
Right.
yeah.
And it's funny because I worked for an organization. We went through M&A and acquisition, which was great. It had been a bootstrap startup technology company, brilliant little company, got acquired, got eaten up by the bigger fish, and it was a really strategic acquisition. And then I was heading up the acquisition and the go-to-market strategy of how do we bring all these different parts together? Because the company I was with was just one small component of this new global division. Mm-hmm. And I had to figure out what all of these pieces meant. And in talking with our leadership, everything kept coming up about their business reasons. And I was like, that's fine, but this is not meaningful to the customer. So I had to really dig. Right. And this is what I used to do a lot in corporate, which is what drew me to coaching, was really dig, ask people a lot of hard questions to dig out what were the nuggets, what was going to be meaningful about this. What does this look like from the client perspective, from what they see and the value that they're going to get? Why does this matter to them?
Right? Because that's the only perspective that matters. Because they're the ones paying you, and that's what matters.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you're right. An acquisition is a big one. The brand refresh also strikes me as something that has to make sense for the customer, especially if you're going through, we're going to do a refresh, there's a rename. If you can't paint that in a reason that the customer demands this, it's an odd thing to do.
Right. If there's no rhyme or reason,
Right.
customers are just going to be confused, and there's nothing to kill a brand faster than confusion.
Yeah.
Yes. And because I have seen some rebrands that went really sideways.
Oh, spill the tea.
Yeah, I will. But you have to have a clarity and logic that you share inside. Never forget. I don't disagree with you about, it's about the client, but it all is also about your team. Mm-hmm. Those are your internal customers, and they need to be a part of it, because otherwise you have an identity crisis. So several years ago, I worked for a company. They were a directory company for years and years, very, very successful, very well known. They were kind of the thing in the industry. And when I started with them, they were going through a brand refresh, and they were moving into, now I'm really going to age myself, a more digital approach where they would be able to slice and dice the data insights that they were giving. Well, the majority of their sales team were the hit the phone kind of people.
Right.
And they had been doing this for years, and there was a pattern to everything they did. I mean, including the fact that, well, at 90 days out, we sell it for this much, but at 30 days out, we sell it for this much, which is a whole other issue.
Right.
But teaching your clients how to expect and wait for the fact that you're going to discount.
It's a weird go-to-market, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a terrible
Kind of like
go-to-market.
an exit market.
Yeah.
Right. But what also happened, and you can start to see how disjointed some things were here, right? And what also happened was the internal sales team was really not on board with this whole new brand. They didn't like it. They didn't feel it. They weren't sold on it. And what happened was when they would start to reach out to clients, the clients would have received the mass marketing materials with the new brand on it. But they knew their internal salesperson, who they knew from the legacy brand. And they would say, well, I have this from this new brand. And the legacy salesperson would be like, oh, that's okay. I can meet that price. They never corrected the confused perception. And that brand identity, it went south. It didn't attach. They abandoned it.
What do you think was the biggest factor in the lack of buy-in from the sales team?
I think that there were a lot of internal dynamics at play. There was a lot of politicking. They just didn't feel included in it. Mm-hmm. The perception was, and I was very early in my career, but the head of marketing that brought this new direction in, which was such a sharp direction. And it had so much logic to it from a marketing brand evolution perspective, right? But the internal people that had been there for a really long time, and they just never bought into it. And I think that was one of the big things is we have to bring people on this journey. You're always selling, right? Yeah. Even internally. When I would create go-to-market strategies, I would first of all get inputs from the people around the business, understand what they were thinking, incorporate those thoughts, and then, Asaf, you like this, serve it back to them.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's all those ingredients. Let me show you where your input was included because I thought about it. So it might not be exactly what you specified as what you thought was the ingredient, but the flavor that you indicated is there.
Yeah.
Very well done.
It's a difficult thing. As you said, including everybody, it's tough sometimes to include entire teams. You try to pick and choose who's going to be involved in, say, a corporate brand refresh or even a new campaign. What I like to do is, if I can include everybody in, before I announce the campaign externally, I like to run it by everybody internally. So I love what you're talking about, that idea of, getting the communication going in the front end and telling, your internal teams before your external teams.
Yeah, and I think equipping them is another really key piece. I went through a major rebrand with a different company that was very successful and carried this actually several times over into other rebrands that I worked on, where we brought them on the journey. We trained people along the way, let them know, not necessarily train them along the way, but more brought them the status updates, let them know how things were evolving. And then before we had the rollout, we educated them. We made sure they had new brand books. We made sure that they had the talking points, that they were equipped with communications. Because again, if we look at it, the business, the brand is the entity, and that entity is created by all of us.
Yeah. It's interesting you talk about the journey, because sometimes the journey isn't that smooth. And now that makes me want to bring this back to something else you talked about, that sometimes you need to detox a little bit from the journey. Maybe you can talk to us a little bit about what you've been building, kind of a guide to that career detox. You call the 5 career-killing corporate toxins and why you can't escape them.
Yes. So I'm really excited about this, and it's available on my website. This is kind of that first step, and it helps people to understand why it is that sometimes it just comes down to, why can't I like work? I think that so many people want to feel that effortlessness when it comes to work. You know what you're good at,
Yep.
right? And yet you feel like work is a struggle. I know at one point in my career, I felt like I'm a robot, just living for the weekends, living for vacation. And also when you work, especially for those of us who may work in more creative areas, we also have this really difficult part where we're creating things that are for work, and we can tell ourselves rationally, this is just business, this is just work. But really, there's a part of yourself in that creation.
Sure.
And so when it goes out to approval by committee, and then you have all these different individuals who also believe that they're marketers, and they want to tell you how you should do your job, because it's funny, nobody ever tells a CFO how to do their job.
They do. They just get fired.
Yeah, they don't remain. Yeah.
Yeah, there's just a lot of those stressors. And so the concept behind this is that we know about toxic workplaces, and this is different. What I'm saying is that there's kind of separate elements that, again, this kind of goes back to perception and perspective, and how we see things and how we approach life in general, which is independent for everybody. And what is clinging to you, what's creating toxicity for you could be really different. And that's why, as well-intentioned, and there's some really great systemic programs that people have taken up. I don't debate any of those, but oftentimes these corporate initiatives don't always feel good for everybody.
Right.
Sometimes they're just too far of an overstep. They're trying so hard to fix it for people. It might lose authenticity. It might just not be the way that one person really feels that things should be done. And it really comes back to personal accountability. And when you can free yourself from dependency on your external situation being what's going to allow you to have that effortless feeling, you also detach a little bit of that. It's almost a codependency, I think, that can happen with your job. Because guess what? Even if you're thinking, I want my own business so I can be my own boss, you actually kind of do. You have your career.
Right.
Your career is your business.
Yep. And most technical CEOs are the worst self-bosses ever, because they don't let up. They work 16 hours a week, and then they have to go do all the other hats.
And I think every industry has its terms for that. You know, we might talk about creative burnout, and you know, we talk about other things. My wife is a decorated cookie baker. She makes these beautiful decorated cookies, and in her world, when you're not working, you're not feeling it, they call it procrastinating, you know, and they're like, oh, you're just procrastinating because you're not doing the work you're supposed to be doing and you should be doing, you put it all off.
Oh yeah, that's a big part of for my business coaching clients what I work on. But with my leadership clients, they're at this point where they're like, sometimes they just even feel like my career doesn't fit anymore. It's kind of like that pair of skinny jeans from college, and you're still trying to fit into them every day. You've changed. That was 30 years ago.
So speaking of perspective, Joan, from your perspective, what is the spiciest client story you're able to share with our audience today?
So it's spicy in that I think it was the real wake-up call for a client. And actually, I've seen this with a couple of clients. So as I mentioned earlier, sometimes we're in that transition that we didn't plan for. And the focus then is just about getting the job. And I've seen this happen with a couple of clients, but one in particular, all of those things that were coming up while they were interviewing for a job. And yeah, we're all used to hearing imposter syndrome, right? They were coming up because they wanted the job. They wanted to be employed, and that's understandable. But they kept looking over and looking past and brushing aside all of the flags that were coming up in this interview process. Things that the prospective employer was asking them to do on the spot, which didn't work at all for this person's creative process. And, as a coach, I'm watching this and I raise it, right? Because part of my responsibility in the partnership of coaching is to help them to see what I'm seeing from that external perspective. But in the end, it's the client's decision. And so the client took the opportunity, and guess what? On the other side of it, all of these things kept coming up again, right? Because we ignore these things, because we rationalize that once I get the job, everything is going to be okay. Once I get into this new position, everything's going to be okay. It's not. And this is the corporate toxins, right? They follow you. This outsourcing your self-worth, right? This feeling like I constantly have to prove myself. Frustration with hierarchies of, I have to get authority so I can have influence.
I think it also happens in networking groups, right? So when I joined a networking group and I started seeing all the success of different business owners, I kind of thought to myself, well, when should I be at that point? Am I behind? Am I ahead? How would I even know? And then slowly, it took me a while to figure out, the journey is a self journey.
Yes, it's mastery, right? Because we get so caught up, especially now and especially in business, with performance and KPIs and these short-term goals and making deadlines, that this comes back to, for me, optimizing your human experience is about creating an experience of life that you enjoy being in. For me now, my business is a fun business world. I'm like, come join me. I'm having a good time. Maybe it's not your cup of tea. That's okay. But for the people that are joining me, we're having a good time.
That's excellent. That's excellent. And listen, I want to thank you for being on the podcast with us today, Joan, and give you just an opportunity to let everyone know how to join you. What's the best way to get in contact with you?
Thank you, Arthur. Yes, so you can check out my website at ShiftNova.com. And yes, that's like shifting your perspective to something new. And I'm also on LinkedIn, Joan Gaffney.
That's great. And we'll have those in the liner notes so people can follow us. For the Brandtelling Podcast, this is Arthur Germain.
And this is Asaf Bachman, the brand chef, signing off. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for joining us for the Brandtelling Podcast. If you have a story idea or would like to be a guest on the podcast, please send us an email at podcast@brandtelling.com.